When you're an entrepreneur with a great idea, it can be daunting to find funding. Startup Raven takes the process out of your hands by helping entrepreneurs connect and learn about potential investors all in one place, without any long-filled forms or 1,000 questions. Sign up for early access at Startuprad.io.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hey guys, hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io. Today we bring you another episode of the European Startup Pulse, and as always, Thomas is here with me. Hey, how you doing?
Hi Joe, how you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. We started the year fine and have a lot of data with us to speak about what happened last year and where we stand in venture capital and startups in Europe. So excited to share some updates as we start off the year.
Actually, just yesterday, I was recording the VC index together with the chief economist of KfW, Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau. And we talked about how low this index has gotten in Q4 of last year, speaking there especially only about Germany. And here with Thomas, I speak about all of Europe. But there was the mood like, I assume right now here, it can only get better from here.
Well, yes, so the mood is a bit down, I think, in the venture capital market. It's very hard to raise at the moment. So startups definitely feel the crunch. However, I mean, the pockets of VCs are full. So there is a lot of dry powder still available. So the situation is interesting.
Yes, I also see that. We will talk about it later. The question is, do the investors start new with more seed investments, with more early investments, or do they try to keep their zombie unicorns alive? That would be a big question. But let's dive into the data we have exclusively for our audience. It's called Startup City Signals Q4 2022. There's much more data in this report than we will be talking about. Nonetheless, it will be available on our Medium blog there. What actually caught my attention right away is when you start with a summary, investments of 13.4 billion US dollar has been raised in Q4 2022. That is 27% less compared to the last quarter. And I actually also have seen, again, for Germany only, EY has their own, they call it Startup Barometer. And there they even saw, in terms of value, 43% decline from the year before. So do you think we are in line here and will only get worse from here?
Yes, Germany was actually hit quite harshly. We saw in Berlin, citywide, which is let's say the startup capital of Germany, this 42% decline. German-wide, this seems to be in fact happening. In Europe, we are a bit better off. So there's some balancing happening across the European countries. So 27% less in the last quarter. And comparison 2022 versus 2021, we are minus 14%. So that is the decline that we see on a European scale. However, Germany has had a stronger decline. Definitely, countries have some differences, but we don't see any, let's say, increase anywhere in Europe.
What I found actually very encouraging was seed investments increased 25%. We'll get to this again, but we've also seen this doom and gloom. Some news outlets call it the tech wreck, where a lot of people are let go, starting first with some US-based startups, then spreading to Europe, and now even the big tech companies are letting people go. And we've been wondering if this is actually fueling a new stage of entrepreneurship development, because all those people who know how to make startup, who have experience in a startup, they may or may not go for own startup and raise seed funding. Plus, you also have encouraging news about the jobs, right?
Yes. Maybe you want to show a bit the stats on the seed funnel or on the investments in general. So we saw on the seed fund, sorry.
Everybody who's watching this right now, we have our screen here, the investments. For everybody who's listening to this, go into our show notes on Medium blog. There is a link to the report.
Yes, exactly. And here, if you look at the timeline of investments, you see that the last 2 quarters were strongly declining versus Q1 and Q2 in 2022. So you have a halving of the sums invested per quarter. That adds up to minus 14% year over year. The reason being that Q1 and Q2 2022 were record quarters still. So let's say in 2021 and 2022, the first half, we still had this bonanza of a lot of investments happening in Europe. And then only in the second half of 2022, we saw like this decline, which, however, if you compare it to 2019, is still at these levels. So we are not, let's say, at half of what happened in 2019, but we are on the same level as we had at the beginning of the pandemic or before the pandemic. So you could say that somewhat a surprising rush to invest in startups during the pandemic was kind of leveled out again, and we are at the pre-pandemic levels, which of course is not a great sign. You don't see growth in that regard in Europe, but you also see that the levels, at least now, have not been, we don't go under the levels from before the pandemic at the moment. So it is very interesting to see what will happen in the next quarters and in this year, in 2023, if we will see like really a strong contraction of the market where we go below the levels of what has been achieved before, or if we bounce back. It's very interesting indicatively to see what's happening on a city level. If you scroll a bit down, you see the comparison on the city level here. And the red line that is usually very much ahead of every other city is London. And London, for the first time in Q3 2022, in a quarter, was not the most funded city in Europe. And I think that's pretty astonishing, because that has been a given for many, many years, that London leads the pack by far and cannot be overtaken. And here, some observers say London is predicting the way forward. It's showing where we are going. And if London is in such a stark decline and falling below its pre-pandemic levels, then the rest of the market will likely also go in this direction. And if that's right, then we will see more contraction happening. Definitely London has lost a bit of its edge and is not so much ahead anymore in the last quarters as it has been before.
What would be interesting for me here in the question of London, if we only see the general market trend for VC investments, or if this is a special case, the Brexit finally biting?
Good question. So the Brexit is taking a lot of time to take effect. That's for sure. We have been talking about this for several years now, that the Brexit will cause harm to the market and the innovation landscape in the UK. However, so far nothing had been seen, and only now there is this decline, which is in line with the development in other places as well. So it's not completely unique, despite showing a bit stronger. Is this the Brexit? I cannot tell you. It's definitely a difficult situation for the UK, as is for everyone. Let's see if UK really takes a different path than all the other cities, the other countries. At the moment, I would be a bit careful to say this is the Brexit, since the situation is overall difficult, and it might just be that UK-based startups or investors are a bit more exposed to global trends, and their reaction is a bit faster than, let's say, in the very institutionalized, government-subsidized venture capital market on the continent, where we might see a bit of a slower reaction to market trends.
Hey guys, this is Joe from Startuprad.io. Today I want to introduce you to our newest partner, Newsly. Newsly is an all-in-one audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up the top trending articles on the web on topics you choose at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. We are also available there with all of our podcasts. Subscribe now and get 1 month off the premium subscription with the code STARTUPRAD, STARTUPRAD on newsly.me. We are looking again at the graphics. I'm here in the seed funnel and just scrolling through the seed investments. But overall, we have seen a slight uptick in Europe. Overall, 388 tracked seed fundings in Q3 of last year, 2022, versus Q4, 488. That means 100 more, which is not a small feat. Where did they come from?
Yes. So you see that there is this big decrease at the end of 2021. No? So it dropped quite a bit. 2022 was overall much lower in terms of seed fundings than the years before. So that was very concerning, is still very concerning. And recently, I mean, basically you saw in Q2 and in Q4 a slight uptick, connected with the hope that we will see more investments into seed startups again. The reason why there is hope that seed funding will increase is that actually venture capital is a bit stuck. VCs have invested a lot in very expensive rounds with very high valuations, and now the situation with the follow-on investments is not so nice because the market is in a downturn, valuations are going down. So if you follow up with the investments you made before, often you need to accept a down round with a lower valuation than you invested before, and that does not sit well with LPs, and is something that VCs are also trying to avoid. So currently, the advice to startups that were funded in the, let's say, in the good years, is to cut expenses, increase their efficiency, and basically become a more profitable company, so that they can justify the next round. But this takes time. And at the moment, VCs are a bit stuck and are not so rushing to invest in these startups that have already collected large amounts of funding. So what the hope is that there is a trend to more seed funding, that VCs are positioning as an early stage alternative, giving LPs an opportunity to invest in more healthy companies, let's say, that have not yet an overvaluation, where basically you start with a blank sheet. And so that's like a positioning of venture capital firms that can now go again into the early stage that was, let's be honest, was very uninteresting during these high times in 2022. People just didn't look into early stage. Now it seems to be again a bit more interesting, and we hope that this means we see an uptick and we get at least back to the levels of before.
Mm-hmm. When I've been scrolling through here, for everybody who's not seeing this, through the different cities, I did see an uptick in Q4 in seed investments in London, as well as a big uptick in Paris. There is a slight uptick in Berlin, no uptick at all from the data we have right now in Amsterdam. Also an uptick in Stockholm, and again we're back in London. So everybody except for Amsterdam, that may be just an issue that there was not enough data published. We see an uptick across all the big startup hubs here in Europe.
Exactly, and so this is like hopefully going further, and it's an attractive time to invest in early stage deals. We know that if we can call this a crisis now, startups that are born in crisis often are the most profitable investments. So definitely it's an attractive asset class. We have a lot of money in VCs still. So the funds have been invested in. There's a lot of exits that happened. All of these funds are inside the VCs because LPs didn't take it out. They reinvested a lot. So there is money available. Question is, how long will the VCs hold back? At the moment, they are waiting for the right moment to invest, new companies emerging, or old companies improving their performance so that they can go for the next round. When will this happen? We don't know, but we know also VCs are under pressure because they have now very big teams. They have hired a lot of people during these fat years, let's say, and they burn costs every month. And if they are not investing, questions arise. What are you doing with our money? As an LP, I might be asking, what are you doing with my money? You're not investing, you're just paying your personal. So what's next? What's your strategy? And the answer might be, let's go for new emerging fields. Let's switch to sustainability. Let's focus on hot new trends that might be the big winners tomorrow, rather than investing in overvalued, overpriced startups in, let's say, delivery and e-commerce.
Mm-hmm. Sounds pretty much like you are looking for the next big deep tech startups, green tech startups, circular economy startups, something like that.
I think that that's a possibility. If you scroll down, we have also a vertical analysis where we see a bit a change of trends here, the metrics. Yes. So we can see here which topics have been growing stably and which topics have also becoming an upcoming growth sector. And actually, cleantech is the one that I would highlight. It is in the upcoming growth sectors box. So in the last 6 months, relative to the last 3 years, the cleantech investments have increased over proportionally. So we see that this sector picks up a lot of interest now. We have a lot of deals, maybe not yet the biggest deals, even though cleantech also includes Northvolt, which is like one of the most funded sustainability and cleantech companies, and actually companies overall in the world, in Stockholm. So you do see very, very interesting movements there. On the other side, stable growth sectors are our classical candidates, fintech, media. You have health, I think, up there, and AI and data. So these sectors remain very, very interesting, and they remain on top. And the upcoming ones, we see only a few that are popping up.
What I also found interesting is hardware here. It's just
Mhm.
at the intersection of all the sectors, but it's going to tend to upcoming growth sector as well as the consumer apps. They're pretty much very much in the middle. They
Yeah.
could be both.
Yes, very interesting. I mean that hardware is, let's say, one of the stronger sectors. If you've been in the game for some time, you know that hardware is not the first choice of VCs traditionally, but hardware has its place in Europe, and there is also government-backed VCs that focus a lot on this space, and that's why it's like in the, I would say, definitely top 10 of sectors receiving investment.
Mhm. I see. What other interesting data did you bring for us? I do believe we should have a look at the jobs growth.
We can have a look at the jobs as well, because investments is one thing, but then the other question one might ask is that sustainable growth? Is that giving also something back to society? Are actually these startups creating jobs, or are they only burning marketing dollars? That's a question that is often posed from outside to the startup scene. And if you look here at the monthly development, you see that it's going down. So we have over time less job openings in the startup sector in Europe. And if you compare year to year, so now the months are here, the full 2022. While we compare to 2021, it's also minus 13%. Very similar decline to the investment sums. So also the job growth and job openings went down. However, in the last quarter, again, a small uptick. So we saw plus 20% in Q4. So December looked already a bit brighter than the months before. Summer was slow, is traditionally slow in terms of job openings, and hopefully the first quarter of 2023 will see more job growth. We talked a bit about before this session that we see a lot of discussion about layoffs in startups. Yes, putting this into perspective, there was a sizable layoffs in startups globally, but also they hired a lot before. So if we compare the years before, during this years of high investments, also job growth was relatively strong in the startup scene. And now we have like no over proportional decline in job openings, and also the layoffs, putting them into perspective, are not, let's say, 100% or over 100% of what was hired before. So definitely there's more people working at startups today than it was the case in the past years. So the sector is growing. There's more jobs being created. That's a positive note. But of course, there is a direct correlation with the investments. If there's no capital in the startups, there will be also no jobs created. Yes, and of course, not all capital goes into jobs. A lot is also used on marketing. So when you look at the geographical spread, for example, you see that jobs are not necessarily created where they are being where the money is gathered. So London has the highest creation of VC fundings, no? So most VC funding, but it doesn't have the most jobs created.
Mm-hmm. When I would be going through your data and somebody asked me, where are all the people going that got laid off from the startups jobs? I would say either they start their own startup, you see it in the seed funding, or they go to work for another startup.
Yes, I would say that there is possibilities to stay in the startup scene. Of course, there is not as many job openings as last year, but my feeling would be that we still have like a good rotation, and I would not expect people to be suffering unemployment at the moment. Also, that's something I did not hear in all of those stories, that we basically have now a massive drought and tech workers and developers are suddenly out of work. I think at the moment they still find other jobs. However, we need to see what comes next. Is it really going down further? Then it might happen. A lot of people being out of a job. But at the moment, I would expect them to switch jobs and find new ones readily.
A lot maybe dependent on the behavior of the VCs. If some big VCs starting to pull the trigger and invest heavily again, the other have the classical fear of missing out and will invest along, which could be a very good signal for the startup scene, but also the overall economic situation. If it's stabilizing, if it's not getting as bad as we feared it would, that would also be a very good signal for the fundraising of the VCs as well as for the fundraising of the startups as well.
Yes. And I think it's a normal phenomenon. You have high investments, the startup grows, and then it goes in toward the direction of IPOs or exit. And then there is some cleaning up to be done. The balance sheet should look nicer. So what the startups are doing when they have had like a big round and they are preparing, let's say, for an IPO, normally they decrease their staff, make themselves looking nicer, looking more efficient, more like a real company, if you will. And then that normally goes hand in hand with some layoffs and restructuring. It is part of the game. Of course, it's not nice for the employees that lose their job, but it is normal that startups are relatively inefficient in their growth phase. No? They have a lot of employees to do things that are could be done more efficiently if there was processes, if it wasn't like put together in a rush, as it's often the case with startups. So often they solve their problem with money, and then only afterwards create processes that allow for a leaner staffing level. And I think that's a normal development.
What I also found encouraging is that there's still interest in technology and in startups. What you especially see with the tracking of your meetup participation, and what actually also surprised me with the participation of the meetups you are tracking, what actually surprised me again was that London was also the leader in going down in terms of participation. We have 12% quarter over quarter, more than 38,000 people participated in meetups, but actually here Berlin took over London in December.
Yes, and Berlin is traditionally very, very strong in the meetup scene. Berlin's, let's say, unique differentiation is the community, is the activity in the city. So it might look a bit confusing that London was very strong in the past years. Let's say in the longer perspective, 4 years, 5 years, Berlin has more meetup activity than London already before. The pandemic did a bit of a shift because we saw a lot of online participation because meetups went online. People dialed into the meetups, and these participants are also counted. So you saw an uptick during the pandemic in, let's say, the places that are English speaking and are very well known. So that's why London was super high. And now we see a bit of a leveling out. And Berlin is definitely the capital of meetups in Europe, I would say.
I see. We are already talking for almost 28 minutes. So I would say we leave our audience with the whole report you prepared for us exclusively. Thank you very much. And everybody who'd like to learn more can go down here in the show notes, click on the link, and get the whole interactive report opened on their device of choice.
Great. Thank you.
Totally my pleasure. Thomas, I hope to have you back pretty soon, and we talk more about the bird's eye view of the European startup scene.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.